Well, hello. I'm Lou Cerny, Vice President of Sedlak Supply Chain Consultants, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our fifth annual Lunch and Learn series. This is the third of 5 sessions that we're presenting throughout the year, and previous sessions can be viewed at our YouTube site. I also encourage you to visit our website at www.jasedlak.com. Now, each session is really intended to provide insight into the services that Sedlak and our trusted partners, such as Swisslog, can provide to address your supply chain challenges. It's also intended to be interactive, with the microphones open to be able to address your questions. However, we do ask that you mute your mic when you're not asking a question. Now, at this time, we'll wait a couple seconds to actually get into the presentation, but I'm pleased to introduce Dave Teeple, who will then moderate the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. We'll get kind of set up here, ready to go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So today's session, as Lou mentioned, is with Swisslog, and they'll be presenting Revolutionizing Supply Chains, the Power of Swisslog's Goods-to-Person Warehouse Automation. As Lou mentioned, I'm Dave Teeple. I'm a Director of Client Services at Sedlak. We'll get to our presentation here in a minute, but I just wanted to familiarize you with Sedlak for those who may not know who we are or what we do. So just a quick overview of Sedlak. We are an independent supply chain consulting firm. We're a leader in supply chain consulting, developing supply chains that are efficient, responsive, and drive the lowest cost. And our focus is really about blending people, processes, and technologies. We have 4 pillars of services that we offer, including supply chain network strategy, focusing on where should you have facilities, how many should you have, how do you deploy inventory out to them. Second pillar is facility design, focusing really at the process level and then building out the requirements of supporting the processes, making sure we get the right balance of equipment and process and flow. The third area is around operations improvements. It's around people, your most valuable asset in a distribution center. And how do you get the best performance out of those people, focusing on ergonomics, human performance, industrial hygiene, and whatnot. The last pillar is around information systems, really the secret sauce of driving any distribution center these days, starting with an ERP or a WMS, and then focusing on the additional services that it could support or enhance an ERP or WMS. Things like WES, WCS, labor, yard management, and other types of systems. The 2 other types of services that you see here, circles that you see here on this diagram, are around project and change management, which are really very important to any project that we do, particularly the change management aspects, focusing on the adoption of any type of projects and solutions that we develop with our clients so that the client really owns the solution when we're all said and done. One other item to note is the fact that we do work with third-party logistics firms. We help our clients, on the one hand, if they're looking to outsource, to find the right partner. And we also work with our third-party providers, supplementing their teams when things become a little bit challenging from a response time, so we can help them with solutioning efforts. We do offer kind of full life cycle type support for projects. What we show here is 4 phases of the types of projects that we do, starting with conceptual design, working into detailed design, implementation support, and then post go live support. So enough about Sedlak. I'm happy to introduce Martin Estes and Alex Reed, who are going to take us through our today's session on Swisslog. Take it away, guys.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm Alex Reed. Been in the industry for about 15 years. It's been a good run, and I'm really excited and thankful for Sedlak to set this up and let us chat at you today about a few things. And please, again, open forum. Please ask questions as they arise. We really want it to be an interactive session.
I think they had some custom milled boards for us.
As far as the agenda goes today, and Martin, I guess maybe how about you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I was going to jump in there. Yes, my name is Martin Estes. I'm a sales director at Swisslog. I've been in the material handling industry for the past 9 years, working on a variety of projects across each's cases, totes, unit loads. So grateful to be here today, and yeah, looking forward to any questions that might come.
Absolutely. So for today's session, as the agenda goes, we'll do a brief introduction to Swisslog. Marketing loves to at least have a few propaganda slides in here, so we'll do some of those. We'll talk about the role of automation in retail distribution and really just general distribution, where we're doing goods to person technology or each or case picking. Talking about designing the right automated system for each application, some key considerations for implementation, and then we'll mix in some case studies there in the middle. Go to the next one, Dave. So Swisslog overall. So there's a lot of words here, but basically what we're trying to say in a not so short version is that we're a full service supplier. We do manufacture a lot of best in class equipment, but we are also a full service integrator. So we do look at what the best technologies are that are out there, and if one of ours is not the best, then we would integrate something else. So there's a lot of new technologies out there. Anybody who attended ProMat this year saw, I don't know, 1 gajillion climbing robots, and we're exploring that technology as well. Everything's tied together with Sync. That is our warehouse execution, warehouse management system. It is a one global platform. We'll get a little bit into that towards the end. But we do take a look at data, and then as far as what we can do on the backside of things, we do have our own service team that lot of it's based here in the U.S. We have our own parts center here, but we manage our customers from cradle to grave on these systems.
So a quick overview of Swisslog. Swisslog is a subsidiary of KUKA, so I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the industrial automation company in commercials, on cruise ships, manufacturing facilities, automation industry, a lot of those robotic arm type applications. So Swisslog is a subsidiary of that, of KUKA. Specifically for Swisslog, we have about 3,000 plus employees worldwide. About 500 plus of those are actually in the U.S. And since our first unit load crane that was installed back in 1969, we've done over 2,500 projects. So those projects are usually built around not just our own internal OEM technologies, but also third-party technologies that we're often integrating into these solutions, and then typically overseen by what we now call Sync or previous versions of Sync, previous iterations. Our global headquarters is actually in Switzerland, and then we have our North American headquarters that's in Atlanta, Georgia, and then we have satellite offices in both Mason, Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati, and then also Newport News, Virginia, just outside of Richmond, or Norfolk, in between Richmond and Norfolk, I'll say. Yeah, I'll save going into any further detail there, as we're going to get more in depth as we move through.
So Mark mentioned we're very proud. We opened our Americas HQ, moved it from Newport News to Atlanta. The Newport News office is still open, of course. But we, again, as far as the size of the Americas organization, we have about 500 and growing here. 120 plus software employees, 100 plus customer service. And then as far as our field service employees, 50 spread throughout the country, taking care of our customers out in the field. Our Americas leadership team is here in the Atlanta office. And then as far as global heads, we do have an advantage here. So our global head of service, software, operations, they're all based here in Atlanta. So we get a lot of good support just for the Americas as a strategic region and a growing region for us. And then as Martin mentioned, we've got offices in Virginia. Newport News is still open. Ohio. We just opened an office in Canada, and we have our office in Mexico City. So let's talk a little bit about applying goods to person to a warehouse operation. So the chart that you see here will read left to right. What you see across is kind of the warehouse processes, of course, not all inclusive, but most of the warehouse processes in a manual warehouse, from receiving on the left over to loading and shipping on the right. And there's a lot of processes, and we kind of have a chart there that shows where we might have a lot of labor effort. So things like put away after receiving or receiving those ASNs. Things like manual storage, sorting and singulation, picking is a lot of labor effort, and then loading, again, you can see that the bookends there. And on the bottom side in that gray bar on the opposite side of up and down there is the cost of poor quality. So if there are mistakes made in those parts of the processes, it costs a lot to the business. So an error in receiving, errors in putting away into storage, errors in picking, errors in packing. Those are all areas where it costs a lot, both from a needing to go back and do the labor twice, maybe 3 times as far as errors go, or from a relational standpoint with your customers. So mispicks, I think on the average cost $30+ on an e-com order. So having to do those returns is painful, and that's kind of what that this chart is showing here. And so if we look at where we could apply specifically goods to person, and where that reduces some of that risk, I want to acknowledge that there are, of course, lots of technologies for storage and now unloading of trailers automatically, loading of trailers automatically, because there are, again, great technologies out there. But today we're talking about goods to person. So as we move back across, we've removed a lot of those processes, and we've made them automatic. So that replenishment piece, you're moving from storage, going right into a storage system like an auto store, where we can use other technologies for things like sequencing from an auto store after items are picked. We can do our pack stations that are semi-automatic, where they've got lights, those sorts of things, and loading. And as you can see on the bottom side of that chart, the risk and the cost of poor quality is significantly reduced. It's not gone. Of course, people can still make wrong picks even in the most automated systems, but from an overall risk standpoint, we're removing a lot of that cost of poor quality out of the equation. So that's generally why we'd want to look at something like goods to person inside of a warehouse. And of course, lots of different technologies we can apply there.
So what we see here is kind of a render that helps give an overview of the technologies Swisslog is most often going to in the design process. And there's some that we have implemented that are outside of this, but specific to Swisslog portfolio, these are some of the main things we look at. So when we say things like Power Store, the name at the bottom of these individual bubbles, Power Store is our pallet shuttle. So when we think about unit load and the vertical conveyor decoupled from the Z movement, that's what we call our power shuttle. Our pallet shuttle is Power Store. And then we have a traditional unit load cranes that we call Vectura. Kind of in the middle left of this render, we see that we have 2 types of technologies for case handling or tote handling. Our mini load crane, which we call Tornado, our shuttle system that we call Cyclone. And then moving towards the front, you see things like mixed case palletizing that we call RowPack. So earlier we talked about being a subsidiary of KUKA. So we leverage KUKA's manufacturing power for things like that. Moving towards the bottom, robotic storage and picking, you see carry pick. We'll cover that in some more detail today. That's a shelf to person concept. On the far right, robotic storage and picking, auto store. Auto store is the only third-party technology in what's pictured in this 3D render. We're going to talk about auto store more in depth today. Item pick on the front, that's a robotic piece picking application or small case picking application, again, leveraging KUKA there in that regard. And then typical parts that you see often in any project, both at the pallet conveyance level and then also the light goods conveyance level. Product names specifically for that, Quick Move and Pro Move, or if projects call for it, can do third-party conveyance as well. And of course, when we are installing these solutions, like Alex mentioned in our opening, this is all typically driven by what we call Sync, SYNQ, Sync. That is our product name for our software. I know there's often some pronunciation issues with that. SYNQ is what a lot of people call it, but I will just go ahead and tell you it is Sync when you hear us say that. So we can move on to the next slide. We're going to move through some of these in a little more detail as we go through. So specifically here, talking about technologies for heavy loads. So when we think things like pallets, or we've done everything from car bodies, boat fiberglass frames, really large spools of material. We're using technologies like PowerStore and Vectura. So we'll start with Vectura. When you think about a traditional unit load crane, right? I have a crane that's running the entirety of an aisle and is responsible for both my left and right. With a traditional Vectura crane, you are reaching 1, 2, or 3 pallets deep with, let's say, a fork load handling application, that single, double, or triple pallets deep, both right and left side, depending on necessity of storage density and throughput requirements. There's also the opportunity to use what we call row carrier, which is a satellite concept where you can use a unit load crane and then have you can have multi-deep storage. Beyond that traditional 3 deep you can do with a fork. So going back to PowerStore, so PowerStore is a higher throughput alternative. So now there is a single vertical conveyor on the front of my ASRS cube, and then I have on each individual level, I have a mother-daughter concept where I have a shuttle that runs the Z movement of my individual level, and then I have a secondary satellite shuttle that comes off that. It can store multi-deep applications, and I think I've seen that done all the way up to 22 deep on each side. Is the deepest I've ever seen one done. Really great for high throughput operations, large batch operations. Both of these can be done into freezer applications. I'm going to say traditionally PowerStore is much faster, and with that comes typically more cost, right? There's a lot more steel in these solutions, a lot more graded walkways, a lot more finer tolerances in the channel beams that go into these. Typically when we are looking at these heavy load technologies, we really let the data try to drive those decisions. So we're looking at that data, we're coming up with a solution, and we're determining technology based on that fit. And then with like most any unit load application, there is some level of inbound and outbound conveyance, or it can also be done with AMRs, but still there's, whether it's some handoffs or some auxiliary subsystem type applications, we see conveyance as part of that. And for us, that's that ProMove. That's our product name for our pallet conveyance that we use. And I think we got some videos in here that kind of show, we'll play through as we click. So yeah, so here you see the satellite concept coming off of the PowerStore. Yeah, I think we can move through that, Dave. That's just a quick vid, just be a short one of each. Yeah. Perfect. And if you'd like to reach out directly, there's a lot of videos on YouTube online, and I can get you more information, reference, white papers around those technologies. Go ahead, Alex.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I think one elephant in the room there. Again, we didn't have it on that last slide, but we are exploring 4-directional shuttles or 3D shuttles. As far as the pallets go. So, again, we don't have our own, but that's another technology that we're integrating. We're going to definitely get more into depth to these technologies today for small loads because we're talking about goods to person. AutoStore, we have #1 integrator there worldwide. I like to think that we are. I think there's maybe a couple of asterisks. I don't know. We've done a lot of systems. It's 400 plus. We were the first global integrator for AutoStore, and we're really good at it. Payback wise, again, it's highly dense storage. So moving from a manual operation to an AutoStore, there's great payback on those. Tornado is our mini load. It's again technology that's been around since the 60s. Just a mini load crane to take small loads into rack. Quick Move is our case conveyor. A lot of times we're exploring whether or not it's more cost effective to use that or third party equipment. So we have partners on the conveyor side. Again, getting things to and from location to location, in feeds, out feeds from our Tornado or Cyclone Carrier or AutoStore. And finally, we've got the Cyclone Carrier. So this is our shuttle system. It's essentially like a mini load, but we've got lifts on the front, and then each level has its own shuttle. We have probably one of the fastest shuttles out there. We can do around 2,000 cases or unit loads or totes out in and out of the shuttle per hour. And then we can do deep freeze with that shuttle as well. We were a late player to the game, and we'll get a little bit more into that, but there's a lot of good, again, because we were later, a lot of good things that we've done with the shuttle that make it a highly competitive product for super high throughput applications. On the robotic side of things, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about carry pick today, our shelf to person. We do have other AMRs and AGV providers that we work with, AMRs mostly from our friends at KUKA. And we, again, because of the good partnership with them, we also have our item pick robot. It is something that is emerging. I know there's a lot of good players out there. We are not 100% married to our own, so we are exploring. Again, if you have providers that you like, somebody that you've used in a facility before, from an item picking standpoint, we are again integrating other people on those. And then AC Pack, that's our mixed case palletizing, and we are. That's our row pack that's there. It's basically able to grab 4 cases at a time with the robot. And that is, again, integrating a KUKA robot into those systems. But again, lots of other things out there. Again, anybody who attended ProMat this year, really cool stuff in the market. But these are some of those best in class that we're using today. So goods to person technologies. This chart, again, these bubbles, I will be the first to admit, can shift and move a bit. Many loads can shift around a little bit more than that little spot that they're in. As far as again on this chart, your x-axis moving left to right is throughput, and your y-axis moving up and down is storage capacity. And again, within these bubbles and somewhere in between and around are a few other new players and emerging technologies. So we've got the ones that we're going to kind of touch on today with the mobile robots, auto store, and a shuttle system. But again, lots of great new players out there in the marketplace that we're also exploring ourselves to see how we integrate those into this mix of things.
Okay, so we're going to start taking a more in-depth turn on our first technology, and that's going to be AutoStore and powered by Swisslog. And so that wording is based off the fact that AutoStore is a third-party technology. And I know some of us in the audience are probably more familiar with AutoStore than others, so forgive me for any elementary information you might already know. But yeah, AutoStore is a product manufacturer. So they are manufacturing the AutoStore system, the components, the grid, the robots, the ports, and everything that go into it. However, they do not install that technology, nor do they service it. So they rely on integrators like Swisslog to go out, to design, to install it, to service that over the life cycle of the system. AutoStore as a technology is considered incredibly scalable, so you can expand the system with no downtime. Extremely flexible as well. We've built these systems into brownfield environments where we, whether it was columns or the layout of the facility, manufacturing equipment, whatever, we've built them in squares, rectangles. We've built them in the shape of a U and a T. We can do a really great job with using the space that's available to us to lay these systems out. Obviously, there are certain configurations that are better than others when you think about robots' travel path, but sometimes being constrained by existing facilities, AutoStore is a great technology to go in there and use the space available. Very, very dense application when we think about some of the conventional ASRS technologies out there that either are using aisles to travel up and down. So AutoStore obviously doesn't have any aisles in it. It solely works off the robots on top of the grid. That's a huge space saving factor. It goes as high as, I'll say as high as maybe it's 27 feet clear height to include the service area for an operator to walk on top of the grid. And so we see typically compared to a conventional manual pick operation, a 60% reduction in space. Extremely reliable system. So across the globe, seeing around 99.6, 99.7 system uptime. That's, when you think about a fleet of robots on a grid, a robot going down, right? One of X number of robots is a pretty small impact on operations, and you're often building in a little bit of extra capacity to circumnavigate that. So we see these as really resilient systems that companies are continue to come back to across the globe when we see some of these savings. We can go to the next slide here. So part of the beauty of AutoStore is its simplicity. When we think about some of the core components that make up the system, I'm going to actually jump to the middle and say, right, we have aluminum grid that's put in place, and then we put these standard AutoStore bins into place. And so right now in the U.S., these bin suppliers are specific partners that AutoStore works with to have these specific AutoStore bins. There are 3 different type height bins. They all have the same length and width. So the 3 different heights are 220 millimeters, 330 millimeters, and 425 millimeters. I would say over 90% of systems that I've worked on or been part of or are seen out in the field are traditionally the 330 millimeter bins. Those can be built up to 18 bins high. So those bins provide some structural support to that aluminum grid. And so now we have our storage capacity within the grid itself there. So then we have the ports that plug into the sides of the grid. This is a picture of what's called a carousel port, is its specific product name. AutoStore has a variety of different ports they utilize: carousel ports, conveyor ports, fusion ports, relay ports. Why we decide a specific port depends on the picking strategy we're addressing, the speed necessary, the handling time of the pick, post-handling times. So when we go through that data process, that's going to be a big indicator where we start to decide, hey, this is a port we would recommend, or for this reason, or these are the 2 ports we would recommend X, Y, and Z for. And so now we have our ports in our grid, and then on top of the grid, obviously, is the robot. There are a couple different types of robots that AutoStore is utilizing, mainly the R5 and the R5 Pro. The big difference there is the battery. One's absorbable glass mat, and the other is lithium titanate. And that really revolves around the charging. So with the absorbable glass mat, the traditional R5 robot, you're looking at covering a shift for around 8 hours. And then at off shift period, they're going to go and they're going to charge when they have the opportunity to and prepare for that shift the next day. When you start getting to that 12 plus hour range, you start to look at moving into R5 Pro. That's the lithium battery. So then you're able to do more opportunistic charging. You're charging at significantly higher amounts within a short 15-minute window. So that's the kind of difference we see when we're deciding on using an R5 versus an R5 Pro. And then sync, you're going to hear us harp on this a lot, and that's because we believe it's a big differentiator and a really important piece. At the end of the day, it's all really just metals and plastics. Sync is the software that brings these solutions to life. And so you can buy our experience with customers that we've seen is people can have the same designed auto stores from different integrators that have extremely different performance. So we're really fortunate to have done our first auto store all the way back in 2011, and the tremendous amount of development and just learnings that have gone into our software and Sync specifically over the past 14 years. Go to the next slide. Thank you, sir. So one of the really beautiful things about AutoStore, and I touched on this in the opening, so you can just add either robots and or ports overnight to have additional capacity the next day. Now, to add those ports overnight, I should definitely say you need to have pre-installed what we call port frames in the beginning of the design or in the implementation process. Those are something we're typically adding in the design phase. It makes cutover extremely easy. You don't have to go and retrofit any of your existing grids. So when we talk to customers and we have these 5-10 year design horizons and we want to add capacity at a later date, we put those port frames in so we can go in and add them. And then adding capacity is also an extremely easy process. We can do that without any downtime on the grid. It's typically a design consideration that we're always considering in our design phase when we're looking at AutoStore, laying it out in a way where we know that we're going to have picking ports or replenishment ports or service mezzanine. We're laying it out in a way where we say, hey, if wanted in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, here's where you want to build out from to add to your grid. So this is a great example of building around obstacles like we've seen done. You can kind of see in this left-hand picture where they've built into a specific DC layout that was available to them. You can see that you can add what we call a tunnel in the middle of this, where you can actually build ports under your system, and you have tunnels within the system. And then on the right here, you can see where they've bridged two auto stores together. So maybe I'm just going to pull from an example specifically on a recent project. We have a temperature controlled, but they wanted their pickers outside of that temperature controlled environment. So they can do bridges or punch through areas to ultimately end up building picking ports or replim ports in different areas than the grid itself is stored. And this is just becoming kind of a more interesting or important piece of information that customers are wanting to know about the energy requirements early on in the design process. So a lot of companies, thinking about whether it's lead requirements or their own internal reporting or especially external reporting, and they're trying to save energy wherever they can across systems, across distribution centers and networks. AutoStore is an extremely low energy intensive system, especially compared to some of these higher throughput applications we get involved in. And I shouldn't say higher throughput. AutoStore is capable of doing tremendously high throughput, and we've seen them do over 10,000 lines an hour in certain systems. So I'll say bang for buck from an energy perspective for the throughput that they can push out compared to systems like a mini load crane or a shuttle system. They're very very efficient on. And here's a good example of TTI, an electronics company. This facility is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They are typically open to site visits if anyone's interested. Also, if you're interested in site visits, we have facilities all over the nation. This is just a good example of a pretty middle of the road auto store, I'll say. We at 135,000 bins. I'll say the smallest auto store I know that we've done is as small as 1,000 bins and 5 robots. And I know the largest auto store globally is over 1 million bins. So, those two ends of the spectrum really show you the scale that these solutions can play within. And obviously, tremendous amount of difference that you can have with robots as well. Some companies are really leveraging auto store from a storage density application. Maybe it's not a high throughput count. Some companies, it's really a pick engine. So hundreds to thousands of robots on an individual grid, really high pick and performance. Again, it can be leveraged for different things within a distribution or fulfillment operation. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know, Dave, if we want to pause for maybe a couple questions if people had questions on AutoStore.
Yeah, it'd be great. So any questions from the audience? Okay, maybe we go on and
Yeah, we'll
get
move
some
right
later.
through. Yeah, so the next technology up we wanted to talk about today is cyclone carrier. So this is our shuttle system. In how we approach projects and how we determine, hey, this technology is going to be better than another. We're really looking at what we have to handle and how it has to be handled. So AutoStore is good at a lot of things, but if you need to buffer cases back into a system of finished orders, it's not the best thing to do it with because you have to put something back into it to pull it out. So with the cyclone carrier, again, very high throughput system. When we configure a system like this, where we've got several sets of lifts per aisle, we can do up to 2,000 totes an hour out of each aisle of this system. So extremely high throughput to get feed, goods to person workstations, to feed mixed case palletizing. And then again, the wide range of handling capabilities. So we can handle totes of a lot of different sizes. We can go single deep if the tote's large enough. We can go double deep, triple deep, and even quadruple deep if the trays or the totes are small enough for us to handle. So wide range, we can handle cases individually. Again, case quality matters. So if you've got bulging cases that are going to fall apart, maybe not the best to take a look at, but again, we'll consider it as we take a look. And then as far as reliability goes, because we've got a shuttle on every level, if one shuttle goes down, the others can keep working until there's a good time to stop, maybe just that service level where you've got 4 or 5 shuttles. You can get into the system, fix what's going on. And then as far as what we say there at the bottom with plug and play. So a lot of systems out there, again, Swisslog will be the first to admit that we were late to the shuttle game. I think the first shuttles were out there in the mid 2000s, 2004, 2005. And this product was introduced, 2012, 2013. So We had time to take a look at what was maybe some drawbacks of other systems and then do our best to improve on those things and eliminate a lot of those. So pulling shuttles out of the system and putting new ones in, or even with downtime, we've eliminated a lot of that with how we do our restarts. And so with the plug and play piece, again, we've made it easier to maintain these systems. Not quite as redundant and easy to maintain as an auto store, but again, bordering on that depending on what we have to handle. So parts and pieces to a shuttle system. So we've got our shuttle vehicles. As I mentioned, there's a shuttle on every level of the rack. We can add more shuttles later if we don't need all the rack capacity. But of course, from the start, we'd want to design a system that can handle the throughput requirements. We have our vertical conveyors on the front. We can add multiple lifts per aisle to increase the throughput. And then they don't have to be directly tied to a goods to person station. So we can have a conveyor loop in the front and basically add in as many goods to person stations as needed. So, if we can do 2,000 totes an hour out of an aisle, and you're only picking at 250 totes an hour, we can add 4 goods to person stations per aisle. Again, we can take a look at every application and see what would be best. We have our in-rack conveyors, the rack itself, of course, and then sync on top of everything to manage order flow, inventory management, all the things that we need to have as the brain of the system to work properly. And one thing I did want to show here on this quick little graphic. So one thing that we have done to try to improve and minimize the amount of downtime that's out there. So in a previous life, one of the biggest headaches was we called them dancing totes. So as the shuttles drove by, or if we were in a high seismic area, those totes or cartons in the rack tend to dance a little bit and they get out of skew. And almost every time, depending on how far it is out of skew, it threw an error. The shuttle couldn't grab it. One of the fingers was blocked. And one of the improvements that we've made over time, specifically for seismic or areas where we're going to get a lot of shaking, is to basically be able to self-adjust and straighten the boxes out. This can also be done as a housekeeping feature. So if you have an off shift, if you're working 2 and you have a 3rd, these shuttles can actually go through the rack, take a look at the boxes as they're there, and then straighten them out so that there's less downtime the next shift. So again, one of those small things that we've done over time to really try to improve the performance and make life a lot easier on the maintenance teams trying to take care of these things.
Okay, I guess we'll pause there. Any questions around Cyclone and shuttle system before we move into carry pick? Okay, we'll keep on rolling. So carry pick is our product name for our shelf to person concept. So this is a goods to person technology that exists really on the backs of what we call our KMPs, our KUKA mobile platforms. And so these are AGV based mobile robots that are ultimately responsible for going out, picking up these standardized racks and bringing those forth to operators. So an operator can ultimately just focus on picking, not having to walk or travel any manual racking aisles, and they're able to pick from these shelves that we're going to look at a little more in depthly. Incredibly flexible solution, right? And even more so than when we think about already flexible solutions like AutoStore. Right. I mean, all you need is an open area within a warehouse, right? That's essentially shielded from the elements. So we've seen these done in I won't even call warehouses, but maybe office buildings. Some pretty unique applications considering that you only need a clear height of about 10 feet. So really easy to install and get up and running. Really easy to add on to, and also flexible in the sense of the things that it can handle, because we have these racking sections that we're moving. We've seen everything from garments on hanger to large, I'll say parts and components for industrial companies to really small eaches for e-com companies. And so we'll look at shelving as well here in a second. Super easy to scale. Essentially, you're going to have to go in and add, there is a safety fencing area since these are AGVs and not collaborative AMRs. But extending that safety area and going in and adding rack locations, QR codes on the floor, and adding additional robots. We can go to the next slide. We'll start getting a little more So I'll start here in the middle with the what I called again the KUKA or the KMP, and again that stands for KUKA Mobile Platform. We specifically call this robot a KMP 600, and that stands for the 600 kgs it can lift, or for us here in the U.S., around 1,300 pounds. So it has a conical kind of pickup on the bottom of these standard racks, and so that's what's going to marry into the KUKA mobile platform to be able to move these shelving units. The shelving units themselves, so they are standard sizes, either 900 by 1,300 millimeters or 1,300 by 1,300. This is where we really see it differ across applications, whether it's e-com, retail. Again, we've done some large parts and components, and you can actually do full pallets as well. So there's instead of these racking areas like this, you can actually do full pallet storage, and people are often doing case picks from these full pallet storage. Where you really start to get efficiency with carry pick is how you customize your specific mobile racks, right? So we see companies put a lot of effort into getting as many pick locations as you can from an individual shelf face. So, you can see it on the left here, it's done with a bunch of small totes. We see companies who get very customized. I know specifically of a company in Germany that we've worked with that have over 50 pick locations with light directed laser pointed picking. So when an individual mobile rack is presented to an operator, you kind of see a picture of the right where it's presented to them, right? There's light directed picking above them that's shining directly on that individual pick face location. So, and when you can get more of those pick face locations, right, I'm able to pick more lines per hour from an individual rack presentation compared to having only a single or, only a couple pick locations on a single rack. So that's a really important part of the data analysis process we go through, is to try to maximize that hit rate, right? So we can ultimately maximize how much an individual picker can do at a single pick location. And then, of course, this is all ran by Sync again, our one software platform. So here's a great kind of example. I think as we click through this, some of our labels are going to pop up here. So this is a great just 3D render of what a system might look like. So on the very front, what you see are our pick locations, our workstations, right? So you can see some pick 2 locations to the right and left of each individual operator. And we have our main kind of thoroughfare that our robots are going to be circling through and bringing rack presentations to each operator. And then you have your individual aisles that are going to go down through your storage locations and either go right and left into the storage locations of these different aisles. The safety fencing that I talked about, you see that the black all along the outside. Again, these are AGVs, not collaborative AMR, so you do have to have a safety fenced area. So when you want to extend, you do got to extend that safety fencing. And then we typically add a service cell where robots can go and have preventative maintenance, or if there's an error with something and you need to see what's going on, those will go to a specific service cell. A neat thing we do is, we call it, I guess, a blackout area in our software. So if something happens, something falls off a shelf, the software will just black out that specific area. And depending on the logic that we collaboratively decide with customers to say, hey, it's more important to execute orders right now, either move to a different SKU within that batch, or even move to a different batch specifically to execute that order. Yeah, you can go to the next. And here's a good example of our KMP 600. This is actually the first gen. This was a really early site, so we're on our generation 3 at this point. But a good site, open for site visits. This is Klingspor in Hickory, North Carolina. I actually went recently with a customer, and you can see how they've customized their specific rack locations for their operation. But I would say the biggest feedback that our customer talked about in that individual visit was sync. And he said, typically, to train someone up in a picking process for their operation, typically took them 2 to 3 weeks. And now with sync, they're able to do that in, he said 20 minutes for a smart person. I'm going to say take that with a grain of salt, but still that over exaggerating just in the sense of how easy it is with being able to do sync directed picking and light directed picking at these workstations to get people up to speed and picking as fast as possible. He said that was actually ended up being one of his largest ROIs on the system.
Any questions before I move into a couple slides on sync on the carry pick? All right, so sync. This is what ties it all together. So we have again, this is a general overview, but we have a couple different layers. So we can be a full, well, say full WMS within the four walls. So we obviously work with companies like Sedlak to determine what level of software is going to be best for a customer. So do we want to take over some of those manual processes that we're doing inside of the building, or are we doing more warehouse control system level? So Dave, if you'll go back to that last one. So again, it's one particular platform. We don't have multiple different ones, and it's highly modular. So if you're adding technologies later, so say you have an auto store today and you wanted to add a pallet warehouse tomorrow, it's adding the sync module for pallet warehouse, and they'll talk to each other. So there's, again, one global platform, and then again, screens wise, we've standardized all of them, so they should look the same depending no matter what technology you're using. There's not a different screen for again, from a look standpoint, for a resolution screen at a pallet warehouse versus what you're going to see on an auto store. And we've done really conscious things like trying to use color neutral, so that if you have associates that are colorblind and you've got a green and a yellow right next to each other, you're not going to make that mistake. It's just one push button that says, hey, you're going to pick this many, you're completing that task, and you're doing those things, and we're using color neutral things. So a lot of work has been done into this. And then Martin, we'll talk a little bit more about the one platform concept.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a dense slide. I know there's a lot going on. It's really kind of to harp on the experience and the evolution of sync, right? So you see sync has over 400 projects across the globe. Specifically, when we talked about over our 3,000 Swisslog employees across the globe, 600 of those are software specific. So even in the US with our 500 employees, I think around 200 plus are software specific. And again, you heard me reference earlier, it's all just plastic and metals, and the software is what brings it to life. That's incredibly true. And again, I've only been in this industry 9 years, but early on I heard the adage, software is 10% of your cost, 90% of your headache. I've seen that turn out to be true for a lot of companies. That is the really important part of any individual project. So Swisslog puts a lot of effort into the development of sync as a platform and its application to the many different technologies that we've talked about. Again, we have our global excellence software head sitting in our Atlanta office, so we're able to give him a lot of feedback from the field that helps inspire a lot of these new rollouts of upgrades to sync, new functionalities, and give them live feedback from what we're hearing at customer sites. 12 different languages implemented. If that's important to your company, or if you're a global company working across different countries. I will say we work from an extensive what we call library of where we keep a repository of all the code we've written across projects across the globe. So there's a lot of lessons learned and customizations and specific things we've built out for unique processes that we found really helpful as we have moved forward over the past few decades to either make those as standard parts of sync or customizations we're incredibly familiar with and can revisit. So we're not experiencing new things in the field that are first times to sync at this point, right? There are things that we've done with sync before that are tried and true that we've already ironed out from existing operations. You see, I'll just say an important call out, our syncs customer service areas. You see, we run I've always referred to it as the fishbowl, but essentially our CS sections out of Newport News, and we kind of do a follow the sun path across the globe to Kuala Lumpur. So anytime you need help from help desk, navigating not just sync, but also hardware issues, that is done by a Swisslog team somewhere across the globe, English speaking, 24/7.
So the last piece is really just what does project success look like, and what are the key factors to get there? So again, we we partner with companies like Sedlak. We can do some pretty decent data analysis, but if you're looking at a holistic plan, they're great. It's one where we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and applying the right technology at the right time. Kind of managing what Dave talked about with the people, product, and technology, but really having the right data and making sure that that data A, makes sense, and B, matches what you want to do in the future. Because automating a manual warehouse, the processes inherently change. They're just, you cannot go into an automation project thinking that things will look the same, but now I just got a robot doing it. Everything's really going to change. As far as your IT, try to find flexible IT integration scenarios. Our WMS, our WCS sync is good at talking to a lot of different software platforms. We've integrated with the big boxes. We've integrated with homegrown solutions, but there's a lot of different ways to talk to different platforms. So make sure it fits within the IT infrastructure that you already have available to you. And if you need to add something new, then make sure it matches your digital strategy. And then finally, looking at processes. So everyone thinks about these automated warehouses being these lights out, all robotic, but maybe it's a single process that you need to take a look at first and find out what you're doing really well, find out what could be improved, benchmark against your peers. Again, this is a great event where there could be networking and collaboration, but upstream, downstream processes, you see where the bottlenecks are, and maybe that's where we want to start. But you choose the right logistics processes that are going to have the biggest bang for your buck. And then finally, cybersecurity. We are proudly ISO 27001 certified. We've got that distinction here in the last few months, which is fantastic. Took a lot of work by a lot of teams here, but just making sure that you're choosing a partner that is IT secure, and again, all those processes are covered for you. Yeah, finally, why Swisslog? We're again, global company. We do a lot. We want to understand your requirements. We don't just take if we don't see you as a nail and we're a hammer to hit everything with it. We want to make sure that we're right for your business. We want to look at the processes outside of what we're looking at. We want to apply the right thing to what you're doing. And again, we're a full service integrator. So from whatever process you're looking at, either we will take a look at doing it, or we'll find the right person to do it. Again, we have a lot of great technology, but there's a lot of good ones out there. And if we're not the right fit, we'll make sure that we point you in the right direction. And as far as from tailored services go, again, Mart and I are available. We've been doing this a while. We don't know. I think the more that we stay in this business, the least we know that we know, I think is maybe not the right way to say it. But again, we've seen a lot of things. So again, we can always point you in the right direction. And if we don't know something, we can point you to Sedlak, and they've got a lot more tools and toolbox than we do.
Okay, at this point, are there any audience questions? Okay, well, I have a couple thoughts here. We have John.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, John.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the presentation, first of all. Very interesting stuff here going on. I am curious about your WCS. Can you please speak about how WCS differs from other platforms in the market? And then how does it integrate with top-tier WMS packages like Manhattan, for example, and how does it operate, and how does it orchestrate within that environment, and assuming automation?
Barney, you want to take this one? You want me to take it?
Go ahead, Alex, and I'll try to think up something smart as well.
So as far as the platform goes, so we can be within the four walls a full WMS. So handling inventory, we choose not to be like a top tier where we're a total system of record. We would normally rely on an ERP to do that layer of things. And from an integration standpoint, that's where we're making that hard separation. Normally, where we're going to fit with where Sync plays the best as a more of a warehouse execution level. where we do have, of course, all the warehouse controls of all the technology that we're providing, but from an orchestration standpoint, we're managing the flows. So you're sending us a batch of orders, you're sending us what the inventory levels are that need to be at a minimum within the systems that we're controlling, and then we're orchestrating all the work. So making sure that the workstations are balanced, making sure that pack stations are balanced, making sure that the system itself is working at its highest efficiency that it can be. But that's kind of where we play. And as far as like compared to a top tier, we're not playing in things like yard management. We're not playing in things like labor management. So while we can be a warehouse management system within the four walls of a warehouse, top tier wise, we're not trying to compete with a Manhattan or a Blue Yonder or those guys in the marketplace. We're fitting in where we need to as far as processes go, if that answers the question.
Got it. One last question about SyncQ. Can SyncQ simulate future volume scenarios so that we can model ROIs or incremental investments?
Yes, absolutely. So we can do simulations and emulations. So we can do both. With simulations, we can, as we're going through projects, in a pre-project phase, we can run a lot of different scenarios. We can stress test. So say you've got a large auto store or shuttle system, and we can play around with saying, hey, you've got 12 workstations. I'm going to say that 4 of them are in error mode. What happens? Well, how many units an hour can I now pick? Can I do the work? How does that affect my downstream process over the rest of the day? And can I catch back up with 12 workstations now working versus just 8? So there's that we can simulate in kind of a dummy environment. And then once we're into a project phase, we can plug real data into the system as we're integrating, or our systems are communicating with each other to say, hey, real world scenario now, I now am going to go 40% more volume on the system. What happens? Does it break? How close can I get to that future volume?
Okay, thank you.
And just a quick follow-up question, Alex. Historically, WCS, WES were kind of on-prem type of offerings because response time was so critical.
Mhm.
Is Sync a SaaS application, or is it or cloud offering, or is that on-prem?
So we can go cloud and VMware. So on as far as systems go, our preference, because of what you mentioned there with response times, is either to be on-prem or near-prem. So if you've got, say, a corporate office that's just a couple miles down the road from the facility, sure, the servers can be there. But we, again, from a response time, especially with super high throughput applications, where we're needing split-second decisions on a sorter of some sort, cross-belt, shoe sorter, on-prem is still, we see the best based on those response times back and forth to each other.
Gotcha. Okay. Other questions? Maybe another question for you guys would be, we've seen over the past few years lead times. I mean, certainly post-COVID, lead times were lengthened extensively. We saw up to 24 months to get systems installed. What can people expect on these types of systems as far as the time to implement?
Yeah, I'll weigh in specifically about the technologies I talked about, and I would caveat this with it's drastically depends, right, based on the size of the system. So I've seen small auto store systems go as quick as 6 to 8 months, and I've seen large auto store systems go as long as 15, 16 months. And some of that's contingent on subsystems that are included with it, auxiliary processes, whether that's robotic picking, extensive conveyance, sortation applications, or controlled environments that go along with that project. So that's a long window there for AutoStore. Again, 6 to 16 months. That's the shortest project I've been part of, and that's the longest project I've been part of. I'll say most typical that I'm seeing, you're going to be somewhere in that 10, 11 month time frame is what I'm going to say. For carry pick, also really depends on the size. And I would say it's very much in that similar window of implementation where it's going to be, most standard, I'm going to say 8 to 12 months that you're going to see in those carry pick installations.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and on a shuttle system, it's going to be again highly project dependent, but normally, again, they have come down quite a bit since COVID. I mean, before supply issues with, I mean, chips being back ordered to who knows when, with Aussie cables being completely out by all the suppliers. We were seeing those crazy 2-year, 2.5-year lead times. And we're, again, normal size project, 3-4 aisles, a shuttle, a few good dispersion stations, and a conveyor system. You're sitting in that 14 to 18 months normally, which fits within, again, when we're looking at and planning projects, again, there's our own processes that we have to get through, and then there's, again, getting the building ready, IT processes within our customers' applications where they need to make some changes on their side to make changes to our side. Again, it all usually fits pretty well together at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. So in the past couple of years, we've seen kind of a shift in the industry to more creative ways to finance automation. Robots as a service, or RaaS model, has come into play. Does that apply to any of these technologies you've talked about today?
So yes, we can do financing on a lot of these systems. We're working with a lot of partners on that. As far as a RaaS model goes, specifically for AutoStore, they have their PO product. So if there's systems of the smaller, again, I think they're up to 10,000 totes. If I'm not mistaken, it may be a little bit bigger than that, but they're doing, we're partnering, we are a great partner of AutoStore and thus PO down the road, but that's more of a RaaS model for a system that's a smaller footprint, or for, your SMB customers, your small to medium sized business. Or even in a larger customer that needs a smaller footprint of an AutoStore, but that's something that can be explored as a creative way to finance a project.
Gotcha. Okay. Hey, tariffs have been kind of on everybody's mind a lot lately. Are tariffs kind of creating problems for you as a provider from a cost or a availability perspective?
So we joked, this is a couple of weeks ago in the office, that anytime somebody mentioned the word tariff, you have to put $20 into the swear jar. The short answer is supply issues, no, not so far, but just the uncertainty has been, of course, nerve-wracking. We, from a product manufacturing standpoint, we have manufacturing plants in China for some of our products. Most of it comes out of Europe. And then we have suppliers, of course, here. They're doing, rack and those sorts of things here in the U.S., where we're doing everything we can to have basically Plan B at this point. From a cost standpoint, I mean, I think AutoStore had a presentation this morning talking about the impact of tariffs at 7 a.m. local Eastern Standard Time, and by 11 a.m. this morning, it had already changed. So uncertainty is pervasive right now, but we're kind of rolling with the punches as they come in. And if we're having major issues, say we get into another, back and forth with China, we have basically come up with Plan B, C, D, and E on other suppliers to source from to avoid any issues on that.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question for Alex and Martin about machine learning and predictive algorithms. So there's been a lot of advancement in the software side for various forms of distribution applications, and more specifically as it relates to artificial intelligence. Can you speak to what have you guys done, or what's currently in progress within SyncQ within the context of machine learning? What are you guys doing? What's coming up for example, for predictive maintenance algorithms and the opportunity to improve the orchestration of internal processes within SyncQ?
Martin, you want that one? You want me to take the first stab at it?
I mean, yeah, you probably know a lot more than I, Alex. I'll say specifically the short bit I know about where it's being applied, or I'm hearing it's being applied most for us, is in regards to our item picking right? And the machine learning that's going into making each pick smarter that happens with our item pick application, so our unit pick or our small case pick applications, where essentially that's being fed back up in the cloud, right? And it's using every bit of information of every bit of pick possible across all the installs of item pick robots that we have, to enhancing that learning to make it better at picking, essentially. That's where I'm seeing machine learning most talked about and utilized within the Swisslog world right now. But Alex, if you have additional insights beyond that, and by all means.
Yeah, the other big piece is on our the load build management and the full case picks. So for our mixed case palletizing system. So where the most development's coming in is using machine learning for case sizes and promo items. So as those come into the system, instead of having to take a box off a pallet, okay, it's a 20% more can of sunscreen. I got to take it over, reteach it into the system, put all the new attributes in it, teach it how it tips, and coming back in. We're doing a lot of that, and we're working on having that be in line, and especially with the pallet build as well, learning those SKUs the first time and knowing how they can arrange properly on a pallet. That's where a lot of the time and attention is being spent. So both on the item pick side, as Martin mentioned, and then on the full case palletizing side is really where the most effort's being put into doing machine learning and understanding, so you don't have to do it and program it one time. And as soon as it changes, you got to redo it. So a lot of effort on those two fronts from a robotic palletizing standpoint and item picking.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And I think, Martin, the other piece, and it's I won't say it's AI and machine learning, but the auto store itself, like I think anybody who's familiar with it, it naturally reshuffles faster movers to the top. As totes are grabbed more and more often, the fast movers naturally rise to the top. So if you have an application that's Pareto 80-20 or 90-10, it's really ideal because all those fast movers are naturally moved to the top of the system. I won't say it's machine learning because it's not really. It's just how the natural shuffling process happens from the auto store, but definitely that's something to be mentioned for how that system works in general.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we have time for one more question. If anybody in the audience has any last questions for our presenters today. No? All right. Well, we thank you for attending today. Wanted to let everybody know we have sessions coming up. We're going to take a break for the summer, but we'll be back on September 9th for another Lunch and Learn presentation with Easy Metrics. And then on October 7th, we'll be wrapping up the year with a presentation with Barrett Distribution Centers. So again, thank you for your time today. We'll be happy to take any additional questions. If you have anything after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. We'll get questions answered for you. If you have any other concerns and you'd like to have further dialogue, feel free to reach out to us as well. So with that, again, Alex, Martin, thank you so much. Great information today. And we thank you for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully back in the fall. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
No, thank you.